So Natural Hazards Research Australia, we'll talk a little bit more about those in a second, but I'd like to acknowledge First Nations owners of the land where we respectively live and work. So I'm over near Perth this afternoon. I'm on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. So Kai, everybody, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present from all the First Nations around Australia, and welcome in particular any First Nations folks who might be working with us this afternoon. What we'll cover today, so we talked about who we are, a bit of an introduction. I'll talk about Natural Hazards Research Australia a little bit more. Project back, this project about what we're looking to get from it, its objectives, those kind of things. Talk a little bit about outputs, a bit of the governance and project side of doing this kind of work. Recap the EOI process, which you're all part of at the moment, and then we'll ask some questions. You're welcome to ask some questions about what we're doing, anything that comes up during this project briefing. So that's just a little bit about me. I mentioned myself before, Node Research Manager for Natural Hazards Research Australia, and I work with participants in Natural Hazards Research Australia's program, and we work to understand and articulate those challenges and knowledge gaps that need to be filled for those participant organisations like Fire and Rescue, who we're working with today. We put those challenges out through expression of interest to the research community, and tap into all the research knowledge and experience that there is to work to solve those kind of problems. So this process that we're part of at the moment started with a research concept which was submitted by Fire and Rescue. Now we've articulated that problem. Now we're looking to see who would like to do that from the research community and bring those skills and expertise to solve that kind of work. So my role as a Node Research Manager is to facilitate this process. So very pleased to have you all here today. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well, so we can create a bit of a community and a bit of discussion around things. We'll talk question and answer at the end of the presentation, but please log those in the chat as we go as well. So a little bit about Natural Hazards Research Australia. So the centre itself started in 2021, so we're in year 3 at the moment of a 10-year lifespan. You can see there. So we have that budget of 85 million over that 10 years to put towards these kind of natural hazards challenges. So understanding them better, utilising the research knowledge and expertise, and really taking that to solve problems and get that knowledge into the hands of people who are going to use it. We talk about the core objectives of the centre. So it's really about protecting human life, minimising harm and suffering, contributing to developing and supporting well-prepared and resilient communities. And this is all part of the federal government's investment in research. And our role is to articulate that research, enable it to happen, and then translate it into action. That's a really important part of what we do. So this is one part of that. And if you look about the process that I mentioned earlier, which this online briefing and this expression of interest is a part. So we have 2 research investment rounds a year. This is one from a little earlier, research round 4. We're up to round 7. Call for expressions of interest. This opened on our last one. Sorry, let me go back a step. So our call for expressions of interest for this project opened on 9th of July. This is the online project briefing to tell you more about the project. We're looking for any expressions of interest to be submitted by the 7th of August. It'll take about a month for us to go through those expressions of interest that we receive and select the preferred providers. And then we'll work with those folks to develop the project plan and proposal over that next couple of months towards kicking that off. So that's a bit of an idea of the timeline for this project that we're talking about today. So let's talk a little bit more about that project. So safety of alternative and renewable energy technologies. So this comes from Fire and Rescue New South Wales, and Riley Lamb will talk a little bit more about the project and the context for this piece of work in a moment. But if we think about where this kind of comes from, the perspective of the emergency management sector. So fire and emergency services have a duty to minimise the risk and impact of fire on the public and their personnel. So really understanding both the nature of fire and those impacts, and in this case, particularly in the urban environment. Fire and Rescue is for this piece of work. So we're working with Fire and Rescue New South Wales. And as I mentioned, the centre works in a partnership model with different agencies to really understand their challenges and put those out to the research community, and then work to deliver impactful research that might support evidence-based policy, as it is in this case, and the decision-making, inform prevention activities within the community and the built environment, and enhance those response capabilities. Other projects might have different outcomes. We might end up with a piece of technology to be used, but this is the space that this project is working in. It's a very good alignment between Natural Hazard Research Australia and Fire and Rescue New South Wales, both wanting to do those same kind of things. So we want to enable good research to happen that ends up with impact within the community. And you can read there that this is a really interesting piece of research around safety of the built environment in particular, and looking at new renewable energy technologies, alternative energy technologies, and what kind of risk does that pose when within the community, and when people are responding to fires that emanate from those sources. So that's a little bit about the project. I'll hand over to Riley Lamb from Fire and Rescue New South Wales, who's been, this is part of her portfolio of work. There's a larger piece around safety of alternative renewable energy technologies, of which this project is one part, and Riley will talk a little bit more about that. Then we'll talk a bit about the actual process of EOIs and so forth. So Riley, I'll throw over to you.
Thanks, Brendan. So I'm Riley. I'm the Senior Research Coordinator for the SARA Research Program. And the EOI that we're talking about today is just one part of a larger overall program of works that Fire and Rescue is running, all to do with the safety of lithium-ion batteries and other alternative energy sources. At the moment, our focus is lithium-ion batteries as they become more prolific through our communities and in our built environment and our infrastructure. There are naturally a lot of hazards and risks that come with adopting newer technologies. And for us, as an emergency response agency, we want to make sure that our communities are safe, that our firefighters are safe in responding to any incidents involving alternative and renewable energy sources. And as well as like we're protecting our environment from any the crap that does come off them during an incident. So just a little bit of background on batteries in Australia. The Battery Stewardship Council, if you can click through here, this is our current, the gold or the yellowy colour there is what we're looking at as far as batteries that are existing, and then in the yellow and the red is the projected amount of lithium-ion batteries that will be on the market and sold within Australia. Then in the international space, you can see that there are a lot of fires to do with lithium-ion batteries and lithium-ion battery products. Of particular interest to this EOI is the 68 global energy storage system failure events since 2011, and additional 17 other failures. Next slide, please. On New South Wales and more Australian focused, we do have a lot of incidents that are coming through as lithium-ion batteries, and they are increasing every year. Most of them are within the small portable devices, which forms the rest of the SARA research program. We're also looking at the electric vehicle and hybrid fires, as well as other battery-related incidents that we are working with other government organisations on working on the risks and the regulations around those. So as far as the remainder of the research program, this EOI pertains to Project 4 or Part 4 of the program in energy storage systems. But to provide a little bit of context, we are also looking at fire service response to lithium-ion battery fires in Part 1, and that's where we're exploring different extinguishing agents and methods, different specialty tools and equipment that are marketed as lithium-ion battery-specific extinguishers, to see how they are working against putting out a lithium-ion battery fire and how they're dealing with the hazards. And a lot of that will go into informing our operational doctrine, how we respond to fires, and how we're making them safe for our communities after an incident has taken place. We'll also be looking at, in Part 2, end-of-life hazard management. So this is where we're looking at in the community where we have battery recycling collection initiatives, bins of batteries at the front of your shops or in community centres, what the risks are in those collection schemes, how do we safely handle those, how do we safely contain an incident if they were to arise within a battery collection container, and working very closely there with our waste and recycling industry on how we store and transport potentially damaged batteries and end-of-life batteries in their systems. And in Project 3, we are then ramping up again a little bit more into electric vehicles, where our focus is electric vehicles and structures, how that relates to the Australian building codes, how that relates to our firefighting, in more complex areas where electric vehicles might be found, such as tunnels, such as underground basement car parks and high-rise car parking. And we'll be looking at exploring different fire safety, installed fire safety measures there, such as sprinklers and other detection systems. As far as Project 4, this is where we're looking at the battery energy storage systems. And that's the whole scope of them, from residential and commercial and grid scale systems. This is where we're concerned because they are a larger type of incident, and this is where there is a greater risk for our firefighters in responding to them. We may have seen some large scale BESS incidents that have gotten some international attention, such as in Surprise, Arizona, and a few others, because of the explosion risks and the additional unknown hazards that may be presented to firefighters when responding. At the moment, we don't have too many lithium-ion battery energy storage system fires in Australia. We've had possibly 2. However, this will increase as more grid scale installations are coming onto the market and as these projects are being greenlit. So what we need to do is really understand how these fires behave and how they propagate from battery systems to battery systems to inform not only our response, but also how we are going to install them and protect them from the risk of creating a fire. So what we want to achieve here is, with the natural hazards focus of, if we have a large battery energy storage system that is exposed to a natural hazard, such as a bushfire or extreme temperatures, potentially a flood event or a minor earthquake, how do we minimize the damage to the buildings and infrastructure and the environment? How do we minimize the hazards that the community will then be exposed to? And understanding all of the fire risks that surround an energy storage system that might be exposed to these environmental factors. Brendan, do you want to take over the outputs, or?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Thanks very much, Riley. So that was a really good background to this piece of work, and you can see that this part 4 sits within a larger program of work. Here are the key elements that we want to, the outputs that we'd like to see from this piece of research, and they really respond to those areas that Riley was just summarising before. So really, this project is a piece of experimental research in combination with some literature review to arrive at some reports on that will fill key research gaps that Riley's just articulated. So report on how best to extinguish fires involving lithium-ion batteries and battery systems. Report on how to best mitigate the risks related to stranded electrical energy when responding to lithium-ion battery incidents. Report on the risks related to lithium-ion battery fire effluents, including venting gases and vapors and firewater runoff. Report on how best to mitigate the risk related to secondary ignitions in lithium-ion battery fires and how they can be rendered safe following fire service response. A report on what fire safety measures and requirements are appropriate for buildings and infrastructure housing lithium-ion battery energy storage systems. And this can all flow into an academic paper. So I think the key thing to note here is this is not about the internal workings of lithium-ion batteries. This is about when we have these kind of alternative energy batteries, lithium-ion batteries, in situations, whether they're in communities or large installations, what are the understanding the risks they pose within those environments and the physical side of what responding to fires and those kind of incidents that occur might look like. So that, before we talked about, I guess, the research and the academic side, this piece here is really about outputs from the project management and reporting side that Natural Hazards Research Australia needs. So a plain language statement that will go into part of the communications about the project. We follow a quarterly progress report system, so report quarterly. It'll end up with a project evaluation report, so we understand the work that's been done, what's come out of it, what's still to do. And as I mentioned just before, relevant communications outputs, including but not limited to presentations and posters. So a big part of the work as well, and we work within NHRA to make sure that the research that is done is communicated out and then flows into that utilisation and implementation part. Because it's very important from Natural Hazards Research Australia's perspective that great research is done and that we get it into the hands of the people who need to use it. And so we talked about those reports, that series of reports just before. Those are the kind of things that are going to help Riley and her team in this space. So a little bit about just the expression of interest process itself. So Natural Hazards Research Australia is really seeking to enable collaborative research, and that is between researchers, it's between researchers and participant organisations, and Natural Hazards Research Australia is here in this link to enable and facilitate those kind of interactions and make research really collaborative. You know, we're very much about knowledge transfer to end users, and I think we want to make sure that the work that we do is really good work that's solving problems and getting into the hands of the people who need to use it within end user organisations, and really promoting that interaction between researchers and participant organisations. And there are other means by which we can start to do that as well as we get towards the implementation and utilisation phases of projects. Collaboration, very much supported, and it's a big part of what we do. Thanks, Supriya. Quick note, so if you've read the expression of interest document, you'll notice that the budget and timeframe for this one, so the budget's been set aside as between $300,000 and $400,000, and to run over a 12-month program of work. We put those budget windows in there so that we can accommodate different approaches to the problems, and I think this particular one is really setting up some experimental work and producing some reports. And so from our perspective, when the expressions of interest come in, this is a guide to what we see as important when we're going through and evaluating the different project proposals that come in. So if we look at half of the evaluation looks at capability and project approach. So what capabilities that the research team have, what they've done before, whether the project approach looks like it's going to produce the outputs that we're interested in, what the description of those outcomes and outputs, so we can start to understand that they meet the requirements of the participant organisations. Industry engagement is important too, particularly in those projects where there's a lot of community engagement and survey work to be done. Not so much in this one, but it's still important that the research expertise that undertakes these projects has a feel for the context in which the challenges exist, and we've talked a little bit about that today. And then value for money. So from the agencies and the centre's perspective, we're not looking for the cheapest project, we're looking for the best value for money, because at the end of the day, we want to provide and enable those projects which do good research and are impactful, get into the hands of users. So it's not all about the lowest cost, it's about the best value for money and the impact that we see getting out of the projects. Just a note on governance and reporting. So fairly standard approaches to project management within the agency. The contract between the research provider is with Natural Hazards Research Australia. And of course, we have a strong tie with Fire and Rescue in this particular project, but the contract is with Natural Hazards Research Australia. We need to have in the expressions of interest, one lead provider for contracting purposes. When we start to work through the process from determining the research provider of choice, we form a project management committee that will guide the work of the project, and that usually has a couple of people from NHRA, the lead researcher, and representatives of the stakeholders. So obviously Fire and Rescue New South Wales, and probably a couple of other stakeholders who have expressed interest in this piece of work as well. If required, we'll have a steering committee as well, which will make sure that the work that we're doing is connected to the sector and that the right outputs are coming out. Regular meetings of those, probably on a quarterly basis, a little bit more frequent when we're setting it up. So fairly standard processes there. In terms of reporting required from NHRA, so we'll, with the selected research provider, we'll co-design, if you like, a project plan to deliver the outputs. That'll include key milestones and delivery of those. I mentioned quarterly progress reports. At the end, project evaluation reports to understand what we've done, what we need to do, and along the way, stakeholder presentations as required, so that we communicated out this research really well. People know what's going on, and those stakeholders are understanding what's going on as we go on that journey. And one of the really important pieces of that is to have that buy-in from stakeholders who are interested in the research, because when we get to at the end of the project, we want people to be able to take those research outputs and start to use them. So we build that closeness to the project and involvement as we go. You will have seen a little bit about that. So project expression of interest, we'll get off the centre's website. That's the link to this Safety of Alternative and Renewable Energy Technologies program. If you go to the website, you'll be able to search for these different projects available, whether they're through the research tab, you can find different research projects, or if you go to the About Us tab on the website and down to opportunities, you'll find all the currently open projects there. You'll also find there links to the expressions of interest submission form, which is where which is the forms which need to be filled out for the sending in an expression of interest for these kind of projects. So you can go to those parts on the website. If you have any other questions, you can email research@naturalhazards.com.au, and you'll find those pieces there, and they can direct you to any further information or resources that exist, or on to people like myself that can help with the project information you might need to know. So expressions of interest for this project are open at the moment, and we're expecting them 5 p.m. Australian Standard Time on Wednesday, 7th of August 2024. A revision of the key dates around this submission. So this opened on the 9th of July. We're in the briefing stage right now. The expressions of interest will be open till the 7th of August. We'll review the applications that we get over the next month or so, let people know by the 2nd of September as to the success of their expressions of interest, and then work with the successful applicant to put together the co-develop a project proposal, which we look to get signed off at the project management committee level and kicked off by the end of October. So thank you. I'd open the floor for any questions there might be at the moment. So any questions you might have about the project, whether it's technical side or administrative side or whatever, I'll open the floor to those. Thank you. Riley, is there any comments you'd like to make? Any things that I skipped over? Any more detail that you think people might like?
Thanks, Brendan. No, I just want to kind of reiterate that this fits within a larger program of works and a lot of testing that we are doing at Fire and Rescue already. And we would really like the testing and the research side of this to follow on closely and in partnership with the rest of the SIRET program, and it doesn't necessarily happen completely independently of the rest of the program. Yeah. Jamie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thanks, Riley. I think you've covered it well. You and Brendan?
Thanks.
Great, thank you. And then I endorse what Riley said there. So we mentioned that idea of collaboration, and that's really what we want to make sure happens so that we get good research done. It integrates into the larger SARET program, and that the outputs are readily used by the community.
I guess one of the questions is, so obviously a key part of this is to do a lot of burning of lithium is basically what we're looking at. And I guess, you know, I don't know how many facilities are actually around Australia who are actually set up for that kind of thing. You know, it's certainly not a research program we've set up at our place to, you know, to have the facility ready to go for that kind of thing. So I guess I was just wondering if there was any indications of, you know, where we might look to do some of these experiments, or if there's an existing facility that we could partner with.
So our facility in Sydney is set up for that. We are going through all the approvals specifically for SARET with our state APA to allow that to happen. And so part of the project work will be setting up the necessary infrastructure and equipment sensors for monitoring fires within a battery energy storage system. So yeah, our kind of ideal would be that most of the work is conducted on our fire and rescue sites.
Okay, no, that's good info. Thank you. So I guess yeah. So I guess ultimately then part of the project would be traveling to. I guess you're in Sydney. The facilities in Sydney. Yeah.
Yes.
Is for the research team to spend some time in Sydney at your facility to actually run tests and whatnot.
Yeah, more than likely. However, we are open if there are more local facilities that you have set up or ready to go, or you could propose to have the testing conducted at. That's also an option that we can discuss.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Andrew. I think that was a good question. So if you do think of other things in the time following this briefing, please forward it on to the email you saw before. So research@naturalhazards.com.au, and we can provide some further detail, whether we tap Riley and her team on the shoulder, or if it's administrative, we can provide that kind of detail as well. Well, just say again, thank you very much for everybody attending today and being involved in this online briefing. I think it's a really interesting piece of work. Looking forward to seeing the EOIs as they come in and working towards some good piece of research that gets well and truly used. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.